World-famous bedtime stories from Mom. Today's story is Cinderella. In a quiet village, there lived a kind-hearted girl named Cinderella. Cinderella had lost her parents early on, and ended up living with her stepmother and two stepsisters, who were cruel to her. Bring this, Cinderella. Clean that too, Cinderella. From dawn till late at night, Cinderella had to take care of all the household chores, but Cinderella never complained. All right, sister. Don't worry, stepmother. Leave it to me. She always handled everything with a bright smile. Cinderella's heart remained warm and pure, even amidst the hardships she faced. One day, the stepmother gave her more tasks, saying, "Cinderella, you'll need to be busy today as well. You have to prepare dinner and clean every corner of the house." As always, Cinderella responded with a smile. "Yes, stepmother, I'll take care of everything." It was a clear and sunny morning. As Cinderella and her family were finishing breakfast, suddenly, there was a ding-dong sound from the front door. Who could it be? Cinderella opened the door. There stood a royal messenger, dressed in lavish clothes. All members of this household are invited to the royal ball. The prince is holding a grand ball to find a bride. The messenger announced formally. Cinderella's stepsisters shrieked with joy. "Wow, really? A ball at the palace? How splendid! We have a chance to meet the prince." They were already excited, imagining what to wear and how to dress. The stepmother smiled with satisfaction. "This is a splendid opportunity. Our daughters have a chance to catch the prince's eye. We must prepare thoroughly." Cinderella was also very happy inside. I really want to go to the royal ball, but she wasn't sure if she could attend. Her days were filled with chores. After all, Cinderella, you might want to go to the ball, but you won't have time. There's too much housework, the stepmother said. Cinderella was saddened but didn't say anything. On the evening of receiving the ball invitation, Cinderella was deep in thought in a corner of her room. How wonderful it would be to attend the ball, to see the splendor of the palace for myself. But she was well aware of her situation. Her clothes were old and dirty, and she couldn't even dream of a splendid dress for the ball. Noticing her deep in thought, her stepsisters entered her room. "What are you thinking about so deeply, Cinderella?" one sister asked. Cinderella cautiously said, I too wish to go to the ball." Upon hearing this, the stepsisters burst into laughter. "You, at the ball? How could you go to the palace in those dirty clothes?" Another sister mocked. "Just stay home and clean. That's your job." Cinderella felt heartbroken, but she still didn't give up hope. "Someday, I will be able to do what I truly want." Until then, Cinderella continued her work with patience. The day of the ball arrived. Cinderella's stepmother and stepsisters dressed in their most splendid clothes, full of anticipation, headed to the palace. Cinderella bid them farewell from the window. Her heart was filled with deep sadness. The door closed, and the house became silent. Cinderella couldn't hold back any longer and started crying in a corner of the living room. "I wish to go to the ball too." Her sobbing filled the quiet house. Suddenly, a mysterious light filled the living room. When Cinderella looked up in surprise, a beautiful fairy in a splendid dress stood before her. "Don't cry, Cinderella," the fairy said in a warm voice. "I've come to help you." Cinderella looked at the fairy with eyes full of wonder and hope. Really? Will you help me? The fairy nodded with a smile. Of course, but we must hurry. We need to prepare you for the ball. The fairy approached Cinderella and whispered, Cinderella, we need a few things to go to the ball. First, could you bring me a large pumpkin from the garden and a few mice? Cinderella ran to the garden immediately upon the fairy's request. She returned with the biggest, most beautiful pumpkin, and a few mice. Here they are, fairy godmother. Will these be enough? The fairy smiled and nodded. Very good, Cinderella. Now let's start the magic. The fairy took out her magic wand and tapped the pumpkin lightly. Transform into a carriage. Instantly, the pumpkin turned into a splendid carriage. Cinderella's eyes widened in amazement. Next, the fairy approached the mice and tapped them with her wand. Transform into horses. In that moment, the mice turned into magnificent horses. Cinderella was speechless at the sight. Wow, this is amazing. The fairy smiled at Cinderella. Now we have a carriage and horses for the ball, but this magic won't last forever. You must return before midnight. After the carriage and horses were ready, the fairy turned to Cinderella. Now it's your turn, Cinderella. As Cinderella looked on with wide eyes, the fairy waved her wand, gently tapping Cinderella's old clothes. Suddenly, a dazzling light swirled around her, and her clothes transformed into a stunning dress in an instant. The dress sparkled like stars in the night sky, enhancing Cinderella's beauty. It's so beautiful. It feels like a dream, Cinderella exclaimed in awe. But the fairy wasn't done yet. I have something else for you, the fairy said, revealing a pair of shining glass slippers. They were clear and sparkling, like they were carved out of pure crystal. When Cinderella tried on the glass slippers, they fit perfectly. These slippers will make you stand out at the ball. But remember, all this magic will disappear at midnight, the fairy cautioned Cinderella. With a dazzling transformation, Cinderella stood in front of the magical carriage. Cinderella, I hope you have a wonderful time at the ball, but never forget, all this magic will vanish at midnight, the fairy reminded Cinderella once more. Cinderella looked at the fairy with a puzzled expression. The fairy continued in a serious tone. When the clock strikes midnight, the magic will break. Your dress, this carriage, even these magnificent horses, will all return to their original form. So, you must keep track of the time. Cinderella listened carefully to the fairy's words and nodded. Don't worry, fairy godmother. I'll make sure to return on time, before midnight. Her voice was firm, and she was ready to keep her promise. The fairy smiled upon hearing Cinderella's answer. Good, I believe you'll keep your promise. Have a wonderful time, and make beautiful memories with the prince. With those final words, the fairy sent Cinderella off in the carriage, heading towards the palace. When the magical carriage arrived at the palace, Cinderella was filled with anticipation. Stepping out of the carriage, she walked forward. At that moment, all eyes turned towards her. Who is that beautiful lady? Whispers spread around. Cinderella's dress and glass slippers made her the center of attention. Even her stepmother and stepsisters didn't recognize her. The prince approached Cinderella and asked her to dance. Dance with me? She nodded. The prince and Cinderella started dancing to the music. The ballroom was filled with light and music, and the two of them caught everyone's attention. They looked so good together. Cinderella would never forget that moment. She lost track of time, so happy she was. For a moment, she forgot all her daily hardships. As the night of the ball reached its peak, Cinderella and the prince were still dancing together. The music flowed beautifully, and happy laughter surrounded the two. Cinderella was immersed in this magical moment. But then, from deep within the ballroom, the sound of ding 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 echoed. Cinderella's heart suddenly froze. Oh no, it's already midnight. She hastily let go of the prince's hand and started to flee the ballroom. Wait, where are you going? The prince called out in surprise. Cinderella didn't answer. Rushing down the long staircase of the ballroom, her heart was filled with fear, only thinking of getting home before the magic wore off. But in her haste, one of her glass slippers came off. Cinderella couldn't stop. She continued running, leaving the glass slipper behind. The night air was cold, and her heart raced. As Cinderella reached the last step of the ballroom staircase, the bell tolling midnight rang out. Her heart raced, knowing the magic was coming to an end. As soon as Cinderella passed through the large palace gates, the magic began to unravel. Her splendid dress instantly turned back into her old, ordinary clothes. Cinderella felt a wave of despair knowing her appearance had changed, but one of the glass slippers remained on her foot, though she lost the other on the staircase. The remaining slipper stayed magical. Cinderella ran towards home, her mind a mix of confusion and fear, yet knowing this single glass slipper was the only proof of her magical night. Clutching the remaining glass slipper, she ran through the darkness towards her home. The morning after the ball, the kingdom was abuzz with big news. The prince is looking for the lady he met at the ball. If she owns the glass slipper he found, he will marry her. The villagers showed great interest in this news. The prince couldn't forget the beautiful lady he met at the ball. The single glass slipper was the only clue he had. The prince resolved, I will find the owner of this glass slipper. She is the one I want to marry. A massive search operation began at the palace. The prince's servants took the glass slipper and traveled across the kingdom, looking for its owner. Does anyone here fit this glass slipper? The prince is looking for you. Servants traveled from village to village, city to city, with the glass slipper. Women lined up to try on the slipper, but it fit no one perfectly. As the prince's servants searched the kingdom for the owner of the glass slipper, they finally arrived at Cinderella's home. Every lady in this house, please try on this slipper, the servant politely requested. Cinderella's stepsisters were thrilled, competing to try the slipper first. The first sister tried the glass slipper, but her foot was too big. It didn't fit. She struggled to force her foot into the slipper, but ultimately failed. The second sister then attempted to fit her foot into the slipper. She tried to shove her foot in, but the slipper was too small. It didn't fit her either. Despite their claims, the glass slipper fit no one perfectly. Cinderella watched everything from a corner. She recognized the glass slipper from the ball, but couldn't say anything in front of her stepmother and sisters. After the stepsisters tried and failed to fit the glass slipper, the house fell silent for a moment. Then, the stepmother, with a suspicious look, glanced at Cinderella standing quietly in the corner. Do you want to try it on? She asked coldly. Cinderella hesitantly stepped forward. The servant placed the glass slipper in front of her. As Cinderella gently slipped her foot into the slipper, it fit perfectly like magic. At that moment, everyone held their breath. "This is truly remarkable," the servant exclaimed in amazement. "Miss, you are the one who danced with the prince that night. The prince has been waiting for you. Will you come with me to the palace?" Cinderella's eyes widened in disbelief. This was the moment her dreams came true. Yet, she remained humble and cautious. "Really? The prince is waiting for me?" The servant took Cinderella's hand and led her to the carriage. Cinderella boarded the carriage heading to the palace. As the carriage departed, Cinderella embarked on a new beginning. When Cinderella returned to the palace, the prince was waiting in the vast hall. Seeing Cinderella step out of the carriage, the prince's eyes sparkled. "I found you. Since the night of the ball, I couldn't forget you." Cinderella felt a bit nervous in front of the prince, but his warm smile eased her. The prince gently took Cinderella's hand, leading her in front of him. "The short time we spent together was so precious to me. You are the true love I've been searching for." The prince took a deep breath, looked into Cinderella's eyes, and said, "I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Tears welled up in Cinderella's eyes at the prince's heartfelt proposal. Cinderella smiled softly and nodded. "Yes, Your Highness, I would love that." The two embraced tightly, and at that moment, the palace was filled with joy.